Hello, Justice Bach.
Very pleased to see you.
It's wonderful to see you and to be talking from New York to you at your home in Jerusalem. The March of the Living, as you know, is an annual event. Thousands of people participate and come to Poland and march together in memory and in solidarity from Auschwitz I to Birkenau, and participate in programs and continue to Jerusalem and perpetuate the memory of those who suffered and died in the Holocaust.
Yes, I've heard of the organization and very favorable things about them.
Let me begin by asking you a bit about your own biography.
I was born in 1927 in a town, Halberstadt, but at the early age of 2 months, my family moved to Berlin. So actually I only knew Berlin. My father was also one of the founders of the Zionist movement in Germany, and that's why when I went to school in 1933, I went to ironically, to the Theodor Herzl School of Adolf Hitler Square. We left Germany in 1938, 2 weeks before the famous Crystal Night, the Kristallnacht, when all Jewish men were arrested by the Nazis. And we went to Holland.
Was it difficult to cross the border and get into Holland?
I tell you, when we reached the border of Holland, the SS came in and said, Family Bach, out with your luggage. My parents, my sister and me. So we had to move out. So when we got there outside, there were 10 SS men with guns around us. They said, open the luggage. We opened the luggage and they took everything and threw everything into every different corner. The person in charge of the trains said, we have to move. So my father said, please wait a minute until it's cleared up. And then the SS commander came in and said, get out. So we quickly tried to move things together, and we ran towards the train that started to move a little bit. And an SS man came behind us and kicked me in my behind. It helped me a little bit, because therefore with my luggage I managed to get into the train that was already moving. But the fact that I was literally kicked out of Germany, that was something that only later became realistic for me.
Right.
Anyway, we got into Holland 2 weeks before when all Jews were arrested. And we left Holland 2 years later, in 1940, 1 month before the German invasion. And we came then to Palestine on the ship, the Patria, which was sunk on the next journey after that, with 250 people killed. So we were always sort of one step ahead.
Now, in Palestine, this is before it's Israel, you're a student, you finish your education, and then you become a law student in England.
At that time, there was no law faculty yet at the university in Israel, but I got a scholarship for studies at the university in England, and so I studied in England, and I became a barrister. But then Israel was created, so I moved back in order to join the army in Israel.
So back in Israel after independence, you're in the army, you're a soldier, and you're a lawyer in the army.
I also passed an officer's course. As I was already a lawyer, they appointed me first defense counsel, and then I was prosecutor, and then a judge. I somehow still am a judge, although I'm now pensioned, but I still am a judge of the Army Supreme Court.
Let me focus on the state's attorney's period of your career.
I joined the state attorney's office, and I was there for very many years, and then I became a judge of the Supreme Court of
Right.
Israel. 2 days after Eichmann was caught and brought to Israel, the Minister of Justice called me, I was then Deputy State Attorney, and said, Mr. Bach, most probably you are going to be one of the prosecutors in the trial. But I want to ask you, would you be prepared also before that to be in charge of the whole investigation? against Eichmann. I agreed, of course, and for 9 months I lived in a hotel in Haifa, and every morning I went to the prison where Eichmann was kept. I will never forget a man called Rudolf Höss. He was the commander of Auschwitz, and he was executed a long time before that in Poland. But before he was executed, he wrote his autobiography. And I read a chapter where he described how they had many days where they killed 1,000 Jewish children a day. And he described how the children used to kneel down sometimes to escape. And he added, when I and my colleagues had to push the children into the gas chambers, my knees were getting a bit wobbly sometimes. But he added, but I always felt ashamed of this weakness of mine after I talked to Obersturmbannführer Adolf Eichmann, because Eichmann explained to me that it's especially the Jewish children that have to be killed first. He said, because where is the logic that you kill a generation of older people and you leave alive a generation of possible avengers who might afterwards create that race again? 10 minutes after I read that, the police came in and said, Adolf Eichmann wants to see you. So I must tell you, when I just read that, and I heard his steps outside, he was sitting opposite me about a yard away, it was very difficult to keep a poker face at that moment.
So during this investigative phase, you're supervising a staff of police officers who are gathering and reviewing evidence. Where were they getting their evidence from?
The German government sent us all the documents of all the ministries, and of the SS, and the SR, and of the army. And they also told me by phone, whatever we need, they will always help us. There were documents of incredible importance, 100,000 Jews to be killed here, 200,000 here, and so on. That, of course, was very important. But for me, the things that really keep in my memory, which I will never be able to forget, in every country of Europe, there always was an attempt to save one Jewish family or one Jewish person for special reasons. And there they sent letters to Eichmann. And Eichmann had to reply whether he agrees or whether not he does not agree to let someone off. But these were all questions of time, because if someone wrote a letter to Eichmann, and the policeman brought me that, until I saw the reply of Eichmann, a few thousand more letters had to be examined. And it took a few days or weeks until I saw the reply. So I dreamt at night that someone of these Jewish families, of these Jewish persons, must be saved. And then, without a single exception, every time I came across the answer of Eichmann, impossible, I don't agree. One day, the person in France, who was in charge in France of Paris, a German general, the commander of Paris, he wrote to Eichmann that there was a Jewish professor, Professor Weiss, an expert on radar. And he lived in Paris with his wife. And this general wrote that this man was a particularly expert. He had a lot of patents on radar, and it was very important for the German army to question him on the strength of what the German experts had found on radar. And therefore, he insists that this man and his wife should not be deported to Auschwitz. Now, here I dreamt that here in the middle of the war, a German general, one Jewish person and his wife, an expert on radar, here he must agree. So, but it took about a week, and then I saw the reply of Eichmann. No, I don't agree. A few days later, a note. The German general had called Eichmann by phone and had said, "How dare you counter my order? I am a German general." So Eichmann said that I'm an Obersturmbannführer of the SS and I don't care what rank you have in the army. A few days later, and Eichmann writes to this general, I have examined the matter further, and I found out that the German army has already taken over all the patents on radar of this Jew. Therefore, I see no reason even for one more day to postpone the deportation of this man. And then notice that this man and his wife had been sent to death. Eichmann usually sat in Berlin and pulled the strings, and his assistants worked in the various countries to deal with the arrest and the deportation of the Jews. But in Hungary was a special case. The Hungarian leader, Admiral Horthy, he thought the war was lost. He fought on the side of the Germans, but he thought the war was lost. And in 1944 he wanted to make a separate peace, but Hitler, of course, didn't agree. Hitler came and met him, and with threats at the border of Hungary, and with a promise, he forced him to continue. Horthy was afraid, so he finally agreed, but they made some exceptions. One exception was that the Germans should agree that 8,700 Jewish families from Budapest should be permitted to go to neutral countries. Hitler agreed, not out of humanitarian reasons, but there were 1 million Jews in Hungary, and he wanted Hungary to agree that these 1 million Jews, they had not yet been expelled because the Hungarians were in charge. So Hitler agreed to for these 8,700 families to be sent to neutral countries, but Hungary should agree to continue on the German side, and the Jews, they should accept that the Jews, the 1 million Jews, should be deported to Auschwitz. Now, how do we know all this? As I told you, we had all the documents. We received a document from the German ambassador to Budapest at the time, von Wesenmeyer. He wrote to the minister Ribbentrop, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He described the agreement between Hitler and Horthy, including the 8,700 families who could go to a neutral country. But then he added, I have, however, to inform you that the local representative of the SS, because I said in Hungary was the only country where Eichmann was sent in person to go there. He said, the person in charge here, Adolf Eichmann, was very upset when he heard about the arrangement between the Führer and between Horthy about the 8,700 families, because he thinks that these families, these now 8,000 and so families, that can be important biological material, and they might from these neutral countries even come to Palestine and help to create that race again. And therefore, Eichmann, when he heard about it, gave instructions to force the deportation from Budapest now at such a speed that until the visas can be arranged for these neutral countries, that no 8,700 families would remain in Budapest. Eichmann, during the trial, of course, tried somehow to defend himself sometimes, to show that things were not, that he was not so terribly guilty. But then you could see, whenever he did something to prevent the saving of any Jew, how proud he was. How proud he was in describing it. So here he said, when he came to Hungary, he testified. And he said, the first thing I did when I came to Hungary, I gave instructions that all the first Jews from Hungary who came to Auschwitz, before they were put into the gas chambers, they had to write postcards to their friends and to their families. And I dictated what they had to write. They had to write, we are here in a beautiful country resort, wonderful excursions, only very light work, but not a lot of room. So please come as quickly as possible to join us here in order to be with us, just before they were sent to the gas chambers. And so what you could see with what pride Eichmann described it. Now, I handed all the evidence about Hungary in trial, and then in the middle of that, I heard there was a man in Israel who still had such a postcard and was alive to tell the story. So I managed to get touch with him. I said, come immediately to Jerusalem. He came at 11 o'clock at night. It was a bit late, and I had no more than 3 hours sleep during the trial. But anyway, I just asked him, show me the postcard, translate it to me from Hungarian to Hebrew, which he did. And I said, tomorrow morning you can give me further details. We talk, but that I ask you tomorrow morning. In the morning he came at the last minute, so I couldn't talk to him about details. So I just called him as a witness. I asked him about the postcard. He put it in, and we put it in as evidence. And then I said, tell me, what about your family? He said, well, I had a wife, and I had a little daughter who was 2.5 years old, and I had a boy, 12 years old. And he said, we came to Auschwitz, we had no idea what was happening there. Also, the other Hungarians had no idea of what Auschwitz meant. So, and then he described the selection. And the SS men, when they came to the SS men, he said in the line, the SS men first looked at the wife, and then he said to her, go to the left side. The left side was, that we heard afterwards, to the gas chambers. And your little daughter, 2.5 years old, he said, to the left also. And then, what was your profession? He said, I was a technician in the army. They said, to the right, because he still wanted to use him for some work. And the boy, 12 years old. So the commander said, SS commander, I have to speak to my commander to see. So he returned after a few minutes, and he said, run after your mother. And the witness, I could see he was back there, and he said, I wasn't sure whether my son will find my wife, because there were already hundreds of people who walked in between during this few minutes that the SS man had to speak to his commander. And I looked, my wife was swallowed up in the crowd. I couldn't see her anymore. My son was swallowed up in the crowd. I couldn't see him anymore. But my little daughter, she had a red coat. And that little red dot, getting smaller and smaller, this is how my family disappeared from my life. Now, as I said, I heard this for the first time. And I had bought my little daughter, who was exactly 2.5 years old, I had bought her a red coat 2 weeks before that. And the night before that, my wife had taken a picture of me with a little girl with a red coat. So when the witness said that about the 2.5 years daughter, and how this little red dot getting smaller and smaller, this is how his family disappeared from my life, I suddenly couldn't utter a sound. The witness recovered, waited for the next question. The judges gave me a sign to continue. The television was on me, and it took about 3 or 4 minutes. I started playing with my documents, but until I managed to get under control again. But I must tell you, that was the only moment in the trial where suddenly I just couldn't utter a sound anymore.
At the end of the trial, obviously the judges convict Eichmann, sentence him to death.
If any person deserved that, it was him. Any person deserved this punishment.
So what were the various effects of the Eichmann trial? What impacts did it have?
Well, there are many things. First of all, in Israel, I had many teachers who applied to me before the trial and also during the trial at first. And they said, many of our young people don't want to hear details about the trial because they are a bit ashamed. A young Israeli can understand that you can be hurt fighting, that you can be killed fighting. But the fact that millions of people let themselves be killed without really defending themselves, Israelis don't want to hear that. Now, that was not the main part of our prosecution, but I wanted our children not to feel that shame. So we showed how Eichmann and others, how they managed to deceive not only the Israeli victims, but also Russian commissars or gypsies who were killed. All of them were misled until the very last minute, and then they were sometimes not strong enough. They were too weak to defend themselves. And on the other hand, we saw it in Warsaw, where the Jews there realized that death was waiting for them, and with what incredible courage they fought, sometimes up to the last man. And thousands of Jews in Poland were killed fighting because they wanted to escape, and because they wanted to fight up to the last minute, and therefore that showed there was no reason to be ashamed. And that really caused our young people after the Eichmann trial to want to visit Poland, to visit the death camps. And it's happening now practically every year. That was in Israel. Also, many thousands of survivors, they never talked to their children about it. But then when everyone heard about it every day, so most of the people in Israel began to know what really happened during the Holocaust. And then there were German state attorneys who wanted to bring cases against the Nazis who worked in the death camps. But they were not given budgets. They were not permitted to do that. And they were referred. But then during the Eichmann trial, when every day for 3 or 4 hours, all the details were heard by everyone, therefore people did not object anymore. There began a chain reaction. All the big trials against the Nazis, Auschwitz, Majdanek, Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor, all that happened after the Eichmann trial, because people did not object anymore. The Eichmann trial is, I think, the only trial where every day I'm reminded of something of particular importance, from a historical point of view, and from a legal point of view, and from an emotional point of view.
Well, I thank you on behalf of the International March of the Living for the work you've done and for the life you've led and for this really very special conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the meeting and for what you said just now. And I hope that we are going to meet again in the not too far distant future.